Let's just go ahead and get it out of the way. Did President Trump have anything to do with the cancellation of Stephen Colbert's show?
Well, here's what's important to keep in mind is a broader dynamic. When President Trump ran for election, he ran right at these legacy broadcast media outfits and the New York and Hollywood elites that are behind it, and he smashed the facade that these are gatekeepers that can control what Americans think and what Americans can say. And once you do that, you've exposed the business model of a lot of these outfits as being nothing more than a partisan circus. And so I think there's a lot of consequences that are flowing from President Trump deciding, I'm not going to play by the rules of politicians in the past and let these legacy outfits dictate the narratives in the terms of the debate. And he's succeeding. Just look at what's happening. NPR has been defunded. PBS has been defunded. Colbert is getting cancer. You've got anchors and news media personalities losing their jobs. Again, all of this is downstream of President Trump's decision to stand up. And he stood up for the American people because the American people do not trust these legacy gatekeepers anymore. And all of this, I think, is consequences of that broader dynamic.
Okay, I asked you a very direct question. I did not hear a yes or a no in your answer.
This is Democracy Watch. Mark, that was Brendan Carr, Donald Trump's FCC chair, who used a lot of words to avoid saying no when he was asked point blank if Donald Trump had anything to do with Stephen Colbert's cancellation. And you and I have been on this beat for quite a while about Donald Trump putting his finger on the scale and pressuring these private companies to bend to his will. So first and foremost, I got to ask about the legality of what Donald Trump is doing. If what I presume is correct is what's actually happening, which is that he's pressuring these companies to silence voices that don't comport with his political ideology, is that legal?
No, it's not legal. And by the way, I'm sorry, everyone, you haven't seen me for a while. I was like traveling all around the country. I was like, where in the world is Waldo? Except it was where in the country is Mark. But I'm glad to be back with Brian here. And to answer your question, Brian, no, it's not legal. And, you know, Donald Trump is getting a lot of mileage out of the Supreme Court immunity decision, you know, because this is not the first thing that Donald Trump has done around these media lawsuits and these media mergers and the like. That is not legal. Let's start with the fact that, you know, he is forcing companies to pay millions of dollars in bogus settlements in order to curry favor so that they can get official action. That is not legal. By the way, it's also not legal for these companies to be doing. And I'm sure that the Paramount board has a lot of memos and a lot of billable hours from some law firms telling them why them paying $16 million is okay-ish or okay enough. And certainly here where you add on top, you know, what appears to me, at least, and I think to most neutral observers, the pressuring of CBS, maybe not as explicitly as the $16 million, but the subtle pressure or the not so subtle pressure to change programming, namely to get rid of Stephen Colbert. Now, it could also be the case that the Colbert show was not making as much money as some other things, but I doubt that in and of itself was the factor. I strongly suspect that the president and his dislike of Colbert played into this.
Right. I mean, we can't forget, too, that the time that elapsed between Colbert's cancellation announcement and the announcement that the merger was able to go through was like 48 hours, 72 hours, so just a couple of days had passed. It's also worth noting that Colbert is the highest rated late night show on broadcast TV. Usually not a sign that that the show is about to be canceled. And certainly if there were financial troubles, which could entirely be possible, we've watched the ways in which legacy media more broadly has found itself not nimble enough to be able to survive in this media environment. There are steps you can take to try to cull down the costs, as opposed to just outright canceling a show that's been around, that is an institution in American media for the last several decades here.
Right, and I want to add, you know, you and I talked off air about this, and there is this really weird phenomenon that's going on here, in which a whole lot of people who are otherwise, you know, normally relatively intelligent, and not always entirely in the bag for Donald Trump, you know, like, so I'm not talking about like the Lindsey Grahams, you know, who like spinelessly slither on and off of talk show, Sunday talk shows, but the number of people who seem to like desperately want to act like somehow, oh no, Donald Trump interfere with CBS's programming. And
not,
wait,
not,
CBS,
not the Donald Trump
CBS
that we know.
might take Colbert off for improper purposes. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell's in the water out there in California?
Right. Well, I think that the culpability of Donald Trump is beyond evident here. But I also want to talk about Paramount's positioning in all this, because they are not without blame. And is it Sherry Redstone who owns Paramount, who wanted to see this merger go through so that she could pad her own bottom line? I mean, it's worth talking about the fact that it's not just Trump. It takes two to tango. No one is forcing somebody else to capitulate. That is her own doing. And certainly if the cancellation of Stephen Colbert was part and parcel of this deal, then the blame largely rests on her feet as well.
Look, she is completely at fault over the $16 million. Like, you don't even need to get to the Colbert, right? We know that she wanted that deal to go through. We know that the board, basically wiggled to the left and to the right to try to figure out a way to get this deal done. But this deal on the $16 million, like I said, Donald Trump may have immunity there, and maybe the Paramount board and Sherry Redstone and others, like, they were able to lawyer this to a place of comfort, but it stinks to high heaven. When you add on top of that, the Colbert thing, like the people who are involved in the decision-making at Paramount, in the current company, the people who are selling it, they are going to be reviled by future generations for what they've done here. I mean, they have taken the Tiffany Network, a institution in American society, and completely debased it. First in the settlement, now in the Colbert thing, but even beyond that, like, even the people who are not involved or are blameless. Like, if you are the next whistleblower, right? Are you going to trust going to CBS with this?
Right.
Like, if you are the next possessor of, let's say, a birthday album with a letter from Donald Trump to Jeffrey Epstein, and you are looking for someone who's going to stand up and publish, that letter and stand behind that reporting, are you going to trust CBS, or are you going to actually trust Rupert Murdoch more than that?
Correct.
And so so the damage that's been done by the settlement, but then also the Colbert thing, regardless of what the underlying facts are and what the lawyers might be able to justify, just the underlying damage that has been done to this outlet is immeasurable. And, it's not like we're rolling in courageous news outlets out there.
Right.
So, taking one off the board is, really damaging.
And to that exact point, it's not just CBS and Paramount. It's not just ABC News. It's not just the Washington Post. It's not just the LA Times. I mean, I feel like every day it is a weird world where South Park is suddenly the voice of reason and has more of a spine than, these major legacy media outlets that have built their brands on the back of this idea that they are the esteemed fourth estate. And granted, the crazy part is it's easy to do that when none of that stuff is challenged. But this is the first time that the free press in this country is legitimately being challenged. And all of these media outlets that, again, built all of this credibility on the idea that they're going to be able to speak truth to power, when they finally had that principle challenged, when they finally had the opportunity to put up or shut up, watching them capitulate shows that it was bullshit all along. It was just a shiny bumper sticker to make themselves feel good, because when the reality is, when they have the opportunity to actually do the thing that they claimed that they would do all along, they cowered, they capitulated.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I continue to hear people in the legacy media continue to badmouth what they call, quote unquote, influencer journalism, right? As if somehow they are the purveyors of truth.
Yeah.
And these other people, people on YouTube, for example, are, they're not up to the same ethical standards. Well, let me tell you something. If the ethical standards of the legacy media are what I read in the Washington Post on their editorial page, if the standards of journalism is what I see happening at CBS and ABC, if the standards of legacy media journalism is watching these owners one by one suck up to Donald Trump and engage in access journalism with the White House, then count me in with supporting the influencer journalists,
Yeah.
the influencer media, because like the legacy media doesn't even understand how broken this is. They don't understand how much damage this has done. I mean, if I hear another reporter say, well, I've never come under pressure, right? I mean, like maybe this is going on in the place I work, but I've never come under pressure. Well, I got to tell you, as a reader, that doesn't really instill any confidence in me, because would you tell me if you came under pressure?
Right.
How the hell would I know if you came under the pressure? Number one. And number two, how are we to believe that when the chips are down, when maybe you haven't come under pressure, but you do, that your bosses will stand behind you, assuming you do the right thing, will stand behind you rather than cutting a deal, rather than undercutting you in the way in which they've undercut 60 Minutes, or won't undercut you because they don't like the jokes you're telling or the humor that is going on. So this is one of these places where I disagree with Brendan Carr on just about everything, but there were parts of that cold opening I was listening and being like, yeah, I mean, the legacy media does have these problems. Now, not the problems he's articulating,
Right.
But they have really undercut their own credibility, and as a result, the core reason, as you point out, like the core theory by which they operate a business.
So how does this make you think about the work that you're doing at Democracy Docket in light of this cataclysmic and really fast shift that we're seeing from all of these legacy media outlets, where they just completely capitulate to Donald Trump and effectively just either infuse him with cash or offer him neutral coverage, or in the case of CBS, there's an ombudsman who is going to be there to serve as some arbiter to make sure that things aren't too far left, too far anti-Trump. And so, again, how does that make you think about the work that you're doing in your own outlet?
Yeah, look, so I have thought a lot about this in recent days because Democracy Docket, like your channel, Brian, it's avowedly pro-democracy, right? So we don't hide our bias. Our bias is towards voting versus voter suppression. Our bias is towards free and fair elections as opposed to election subversion. Our bias is towards rule of law instead of lawlessness. We are open about that. We don't hide the fact that we have that bias. But that doesn't mean that the information you get is any less accurate. In fact, there are various fact checkers that have looked at Democracy Docket, and they find that Democracy Docket is factually accurate. Like, the information we provide is truthful. It is accurate. What it is, though, it is not afraid of calling it like it is. It is not afraid of saying voter suppression is bad. Donald Trump is authoritarian. Okay, it is not afraid to say that what the Republican Party is doing are being mindless sycophants to protect Donald Trump from the Epstein files. But it is otherwise providing, accurate news, information, and analysis, and it's providing coverage on things that the legacy media doesn't. So while the legacy media chases approval from Donald Trump and his billionaire friends and try not to offend the White House, Democracy Docket's willing to tell the truth. But Brian, that's the reason why for years now, in addition to me, creating and publishing Democracy Docket since 2020, you and I have been doing these videos. We've been doing these videos from before Donald Trump was in office. Yeah. Like, maybe more people are watching them now, but you and I have been doing this now for 300 and some odd episodes going back years, because the need for this kind of information and analysis is not new to the Donald Trump era. This has been a problem with the legacy media that goes back now for years. Sure, it has gotten much worse. It's gotten more pronounced. It is accelerated. You are seeing more and more instances of legacy media failing, and you're seeing growth on this channel, on Democracy Docket's YouTube channel, on Democracy Docket's newsletters and its website. You're seeing much more dramatic growth right now because people are more fed up with the legacy media. But, you've been doing this for how many years now? And that has been a niche that you have filled and a niche that we try to fill at Democracy Docket.
Well, to that exact point, for anybody who's watching right now, please help independent media, help support the work that Marc and his team are doing. I'm going to put the link to Democracy Docket's YouTube channel right here on the screen. And if you check the post description, you'll see that link to the YouTube channel as well as the news outlet itself. So if you're not yet subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. Support fearless independent journalism that is actually meeting this moment with the urgency that it deserves, which is underscored by virtue of the fact that we are watching the CBS's and Paramounts and ABC News's, LA Times and Washington Post of the world continue to capitulate to Donald Trump, heap praise onto him, prevent any negative coverage of him because they don't want to make him upset. So that is that does put on full display the extent to which we need the kind of coverage that Marc and his team are putting forward. So again, you can check those links on the screen and also in the post description. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.